So glad to be here. So excited about the next few hours tonight's going to hold. Just kidding. I think I was told to be done by 10:30. I think. Maybe. Good. That's all right. I love it. I'm a professor, so I mean that's a hard one to stop me. So that's my wife will remind me to. Because I think, what are we stopping for? Remember? Dessert. Yeah, see, I can't win. So important, the dessert part, for those that like food. So that was an incredible meal. That was my first meal I've had in like 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks now. So, the beginning of January, the Crohn's flare up. And I've been just kind of, hey, I got to I ate fish basically, and so that was so good. so good. So love it. A little bit just about me. This is my home, where I used to live, where I grew up. Temuco, Chile. I'm a missionary kid from Chile that, against my wishes, was moved to America right before my senior year of high school. So I did not like my parents a lot. Moved to America, adjusting to English, adjusting to culture, and then went to college. I went to college with a heart and passion for ministry and for music, and then found out you have to have talent. And crashed and burned. My junior year, they said, "You're not graduating, you need to find a new life." And I cried, they cried, it was a moment. And had to really, literally try to reinvent myself. And so I looked around and tried to figure out what to do. And I'm not going to major in Spanish. I know Spanish better than teachers do. I'm not going to major in, I like art, do that. I'll do this counseling class. God's so amazing. One class. My whole life got turned upside down, and so continued on, and been a therapist for 23 years and professor for 18 years. Just so thankful for that and what that's led to. Tonight, you guys are probably from all different walks of life and ages, and how many years married? Who's been married the longest?
Not us.
How many years?
58.
58. Oh, love it. The winner, yeah. How about the least amount? Less than one? 2? How about 1 year? 1 year, okay. So 1 year, yes. Love
Isn't
it.
the national average like 6 years or something? I think it is.
It's terrible. Yeah.
33 for us.
33, good. We're at 19 years, so we're just getting started. We're just barely figuring it out what 19 years is like, and she puts up with me. But it's neat to think about marriage. To me, it's one of the things that I get to spend a lot of my time doing is talking to couples. But I don't get to talk to couples like where hopefully most of you are at. Did you know that these kind of events are not really for couples that are struggling? If you're struggling, what I ask you to do is to suspend all expectations of the weekend. Because that's actually where we crash and burn. We start looking at some of the stuff we're going to do today. Because if you're not sitting next to your spouse, you might want to move and get next to them because you're going to do some work. You're sitting spread out. But a marriage retreat, a marriage conference even, is for the couple that's actually doing well that wants to grow. When you're not doing well, you go to one of those and you listen to what's said, and you're like, we're so far from that, I'm done. It's easy to give up at that point, and actually a lot of people do. A lot of people leave a conference and go get a divorce. So I had a couple one time that's what they were struggling, and their parents had bought them a weekend to remember, and I was like, you better go with 0 expectations. And they did, and they survived it. The day they came back and like, you were so right. Like every fiber of my being, I wanted to quit us. And they didn't. They were able to begin slowly mending. We're going to look at a lot of stuff that's hopefully going to be fun. Like this weekend, I hope it's fun. And as we talk after tonight, so sometime tomorrow and just in passing, I also want to be able to hear from you as to what you feel like you need. And that will even shape, I might change what I've got tomorrow because of what I hear from you. So my heart is that what I've got is something that you might need, even with 58 years of marriage. And just how beautiful that is. It doesn't matter how long we've been married, we continue to grow and actually become more like Christ. And that's what marriage does. It's that iron sharpens iron that really tests us and pushes us. introduce. This is my best day of my life. I get chills every time I see that. I can't believe she said yes, first of all, but it's been this long and just
And with witnesses, clearly.
I know.
That's so true. Yeah, she actually wanted to have like an explosion on the side and her sneak down the aisle because the idea of being center of attention was like horrifying for her. And I was beaming because it was so amazing. It was great. But then when you do that, you actually start making kids too. This is our directory picture for church. It's the best thing to do.
Oh boy.
I call these my experiments because I speak a lot. I remember a few years ago I was traveling to speak at a parenting conference, and while traveling I'm dealing with a teenager texting a girl who's self-harming. It's like, thank you for giving me more to talk about where we're going. Oh, you're stressing me out. Because parenting's hard. All of this stuff is hard. But in one sense, I actually say it shouldn't be as hard as we make it. That a lot of what we do is we make ourselves more stressed out because we're not on the same page. We're not working in unified, if you will. And so we're going to look at that tonight and tomorrow. Just kind of how can we do that? How can we lean into each other, especially when we don't want to, when it's hard. Then they grow up a little bit. This was another one of our photo shoots that got crazy. Because our kids have personalities, which they don't tell you that in the books. And our latest picture, they're all grown up. Although it's funny, a couple of Sundays ago, our pastor was preaching on 1 Corinthians 11, and our son was sitting 2 rows in front of us, and he was talking about how men shouldn't have long hair, and our son's got long hair. He keeps looking back at us. But right before then, not knowing, my wife had given them a lecture about do not wear your hats to church because they keep doing that, and they did not that day, luckily. But it's been amazing moving 10 years ago even to the Northwest, and my wife is commenting just driving up here just how thankful we are for where we live and the people we know and the relationships we built and the adventures we've had with our kiddos, and just how incredible that is. Because if you're not careful, we do get caught up in the politics of it, and you want to run. And then you go to Texas and see how hot it is, and you don't want to run anymore. And that's where all of our family lives. But I want you to do something. This packet you have in front of you it's the order roughly that we're going to go through, and we're going to start with this first part. That all of us came here with burdens. And so I want you to absorb what you can, take notes for yourself. This isn't you taking notes for what your spouse needs to learn. And then what are you going to do this week? Yes, grab pens. But on that, I think it's on the second page, third page in there, the first set of blanks. I want you, the first thing to do is you keep a list of preoccupations in your notes there on that third page there, the blank full of lines. You have a list in your head right now of some things you need to get done. And what if you actually keep trying to think about those things while we do this time here, you're going to be distracted. And think of this practice. It's actually really helpful. Take a note of what you're thinking about and what you need to take care of later and tomorrow and Sunday. When you get home, you got to do this and you got to do that. Write them down. And as things pop in your mind, flip back to that sheet and write those things down where you dump them off your thinking and you can focus on what we're doing. It's a really helpful practice. And I would encourage you tonight to be, again, go back to that page. Because it's important for us to be present. Because one of the things that's happened in our marriages is we've got something that's actually gotten in between us as couples. What are some of those things that have gotten between us as a couple?
The kids.
Kids, yes. They always get in the way.
Schedules.
Yes, schedules. Schedules get crazy and get busy and you become Uber. And when they start driving, it's so exciting. And scary too. What else?
Other people's needs.
Other people's needs. Ministry, absolutely, yes. The number one I'm thinking about is this, though. I call this actually a porn portal, just in case you're wondering. Because we love to give our kids these things. These are dangerous tools. They're supposed to be a tool that have changed our world. And even in our marriages, these have gotten in the way. And what's crazy is that when I talk to teens, when I talk to college students, what's the biggest thing that they talk about their parents? Their parents don't steward these very well. And we need to actually think about that, to be at least cognizant of that. A few years ago, we put a piece of paper on the wall and we kind of said, kids, define our family. Like, put some I guess, who are we? And we were expecting the worst. It was one of those kind of like, oh gosh. And it was really fun to see what they put on there. But the one thing that stood out was, you're on your phones too much. So I'm like, ouch. Something to think about. And something to ask your kids regularly is kind of how are we all doing as a family, and engage with them. If it's just you and you're in a different stage of life, then that's a shorter conversation. It's with each other. But part of what we're going to do tonight too is also that. It doesn't matter where you're at, whether you're brand new, no kids, or you're an empty nester, you still have to kind of have that coming together. Every day we go out and conquer the world, we do our thing, we come back together. But even just think of how our schedules are with when we go to bed together, and how easy it is to not be in sync there. Because of schedules, we miss each other. There's days we don't see each other. How busy we get, and how easy it is to actually get disconnected. I would say the default is actually where we stay disconnected. So the work is to get reconnected as a couple. So the first thing I'm going to give you is on that next page is we're going to look at 2 things to do every day, every week, every month, every year. I'm just going to give them all to you here at the front, and then we're going to talk through them over the weekend. But these are kind of an assignment of 2 things to do every day, every week, every month, and every year. And the first one is taking time to touch, if only for a minute. The research and what it shows even on just being close to someone, our body chemistry changes. It's so powerful of what being close to someone is, what touch does. They've done research studies on couples who are having a fight, and they get in bed and they go to their separate corners of the bed, and if you have a king-size bed, it's even further away. And they don't touch, and they wake up the next morning and they actually have a lot to resolve. They're stressed out, they didn't sleep well. Versus the couple that, even though they didn't resolve it, they have some body part touching. Like their rear ends are touching, or their ankles or feet. There's some physical touch happening. The couple wakes up the next morning with a lot calmer self, like they've physically resolved it. They just need to catch up verbally. Our being close is critical to our health. Just like we know with babies that go untouched, what happens? They die. It is horrifying how critical touch is. I don't know about you, even just the last few years, I'm a hugger. I grew up in South America. You hug and kiss. I can't imagine what it's like down there now where everyone's kind of afraid. We need touch. We need to be close. Zoom world, we do meetings on Zoom. It's a great tool, wonderful tool, but there's something very different about being incarnational, being in the presence of other people. And so we use those other tools when necessary, but there's something about being together, worshiping together. Really, really important. So taking time to touch. And then the second one for the every day is find something you can laugh about. Might even be each other, I don't know, but you need to be able to laugh. And I have found that that's a gauge for my wife and I. There's days where it's like, you know what, we haven't laughed in a while, and we need to find that again. And that's going to be different for all of us. TV shows, I mean, there's so many TV shows now that are just not worth your time. But find some show you like, find something that you like. But what you do in terms of laughter, touch and laughter, or something you can do immediately every day. And I would say if you have little kids, this is even more important. Because it's easy to just get caught up in the everyday chaos, if you will. Every week, what do we need to do? Do something active to lift your spirits. Go out for a walk. Do something physically active. it's easy to get lost in our busyness. The amount of days I know I've actually gotten where I look at my steps and go, gosh, have I only walked from the bed to my chair that I'm sitting in doing a Zoom call after Zoom call kind of thing. It's like this is not healthy. And I can see that especially in the beginning of COVID stuff. But another really important one for the every week is boosting your partner's self-esteem. What do you verbally do to speak to your partner? What are you saying to your partner? Have you thought about that? One of you is probably a little more verbal than the other. Just a little. My amount of words per day are probably like 10 times my wife's. She's met her quota by like noon, and then I come home at 11:30 at night and I have 40,000 more words to unpack. So bless her. She's a saint. It's like I talk and talk and talk and talk everything through, and sometimes I even have to then go, okay, now I'm actually free to now really listen, because all that you were ignoring because it would just be out loud processing, which means what kind of processor is she? Verbal or
No.
yeah, internal, which means I have no clue sometimes. I remember sitting on the porch in Georgia at our house, and one day just we had little kids and in the background playing, and it was raining, and I look over, there's a tear running down her cheek, and I'm like, what? How did I not know? It's just like totally caught me off guard that she wasn't okay, and she was stressed, and because she holds it in. And I bet you have possibly one of each, which means staying attuned to each other is a critical thing to do. It takes effort. I was a hopeless romantic until I married her, because I married someone that none of that worked on, which I think is God's point. When we get married to someone who's very different than us, which makes us actually have to work for it. If it was easy, I don't think it would have the value that it has. So that's an important one. And then once a month. Yeah, there's some stuff you might need to get out. Rid yourself of harmful residue. There's things you need to probably say. But when? If you actually think about this every day, every week, every month, every year, you start realizing there's a pattern of just saying we need to regularly kind of have these moments, from touch and laughter to being verbal with my partner, especially if that's not normal for me, to, you know what, there's some things I need to say, and there's a thing in the packet later that we'll talk about how for each of these. But here's the other one, once a month. I remember the first time I read this, I'm like, what? The second one here is fire up passion in the bedroom. Like, once a month? Wait a minute, that's not okay. And one of the things that the parrots here are talking about is spice it up. Is everything gets routine, it gets too routine, if you will. I could spend this whole weekend talking about sex and sexuality. That's what I do. That's what I teach on. That's what I'm a sex therapist. I've written 2 books on gender and sexuality for parents and for kids, and this is my heart and passion. And so if you want more, talk to me. But this is an area where there's so much issues, but we're afraid to talk about it. We're just afraid to talk about it. And so imagine couples where oftentimes one has no idea and the other one is really hurting, or has really huge questions. Or the amount of couples I see where the wife says, oh, I can say no, I can have a boundary and not do what he's asking me to do. And it's usually coming from porn, and it's like, oh my gosh, yes, you can say no. And oh my gosh, you can have things you won't do. And so it's important to know on kind of both ends of this, of how do we do this well? The sexual part, because the world is screaming, kink it up and do all this ridiculous, crazy, horribly unhealthy things. So we need some direction here. We really, really probably want now in our culture more than ever some direction when it comes to this. And so, yeah, what could be something we do different? What that requires is talking, planning, thinking ahead. See where a lot of this, from even this weekend, tends to not happen when we leave tomorrow. And then the last once a year ones is review your top 10 highlights and then chart your course for the coming year. Something that some of you probably have done well, but some don't. we don't look backwards and kind of go, hey, how does this even season go versus even the year? But also, what do we want different this year? What do I want this coming season to look like? When you have kids, I'm talking seasons even, not even year. But there's times we need to really kind of check back in and go, how are we doing on this? How are we missing each other? Am I missing something, some cues that you've been giving me, and I'm not attuned to you? And so here's that list, in case you missed some of the earlier ones. But think about those things, and what I want you to kind of hold on to in terms of even conversations later on. And if you think of this weekend, we're going to talk a bit more today, now, and then we're going to go eat, which is going to be about fellowship and time together even. But then we're going to go back to our separate spaces. And the goal is to continue this conversation. This may be a moment where there needs to be some things talked about. I don't want it to be, okay, we're having hard conversations tonight. I actually don't want that for you right now. You need to probably schedule that. But I want you to be able to say, you know what, there's some things that we're going to go there that would be helpful for us. Something stood out to me. What stood out to you tonight? And then we're going to go sleep. And we're going to wake up. And tomorrow we're going to have a couple more sessions to plant some seeds of tools you can use going forward. And the truth is we could use a time like this probably every season, every 4 months, 3 months. I mean, it's honest truth. Just like what I tell my youth pastors, our kids' youth pastors, last year they were talking about we need to do this season on gender and sexuality, and I was like, if every Wednesday night for youth group we talked about gender and sexuality, for this whole year we wouldn't have covered it enough with how much they're getting everywhere else. And that's on the conservative side. Like there's so many other topics we need to talk about. Yes, this is one that is we're losing children over, and I'm very passionate about that as to how we are literally mutilating children, and just how my heart breaks for families. I work a lot with couples and families that are dealing with children that are struggling or transitioning, and this world is not the same world that even my college students I look at and go, it's not where you were at 3 years ago when you graduated, or 4 years ago when you graduated. It's so different, which makes this right here more important than ever. That you be an example for a younger generation. And not an example that they're watching just kind of out of the corner of their eye. They are. But one that kind of gets up in their face a little. One that actually leads. The one that actually says, hey, hard question. Hey, let me challenge you on that. Hey, let me call you up to something maybe a lot better. Might be harder, but a lot better. Like work. It's amazing how we have a generation right now that can't work or won't work. Like, go back to the Bible. Work was a part of pre-fall. Remember that. It was a part of what I don't understand was Adam was walking the garden with God and still felt like he was missing something. Whoa, that baffles my mind.
Yeah.
And it's because he hadn't met a woman yet, which all those guys go, that's why, we know why. And it's so cool to think about that. And to think about the design, even of sexuality. We didn't have, God made man, woman, sin, and then Satan slapped on the genitals. That's not how it worked. It's like, no, this is all part of pre-fall. So because of the fall, we are actually sons and daughters of Adam. And so who we are actually is broken people. Like, did you know that you actually think you're right about everything? Have you met you? Have your spouse met you? Because I actually wonder how any marriage can work. Because I know I'm right. I mean, I speak for a living, so it's like, so then what about her? It's like, well, so much of what I do is because she's challenged me. Because she's actually, and one of the things that I think every time she even pushes back on something, my first instinct now, it wasn't in the beginning, now is I'm so thankful she feels safe enough to do so. Because I see so many couples where they won't, because they're afraid of the repercussions, they're afraid of the anger, they're afraid of the consequences. Now in the beginning, I remember the first time she said, Corey, I think your parenting needs to, I'm like, who are you? I read all the books. You won't touch the books. I'm a sheep. And then 5 seconds later, like, crap, you're right. And then to realize that's actually usually the case. And so how critical it is as to who you married and why you married them. And no, they're not always right, neither of you. But we still hold on to these things. We have to be careful how tightly we hold on to these things. To be able to let go of some of those. But there are some main things that need to stay the main things. Scripture, the Bible. Your relationship with other believers. How critical those are. Jesus, who he is, was and is, what he did. We need to hang on to those things. So, question I want to ask is, where did marriage originate? We have a culture that says that it's archaic. One of the biggest pushes, as I was writing my second book, we were about to go to print, and Kelly was like, we have to add a new chapter into this for the teenager one, and it was on polyamory. Because it is more and more common, especially Portland, Seattle, this Northwest, and it's just going to sweep across the country anyway, but it's having multiple partners, having 3, 4, 5 that have different sexual whatever combinations. It's just sad. Because they're trying to reinvent the wheel because, marriage, one man, one woman, which by the way is the only combination, is for life. And that's so old school. I've heard students at Corbin say that they've gotten engaged and their friends in Portland have disowned them to something like they won't talk to them because how would you dare settle for something so old? Because you're not enlightened enough. That's where we're at. And so we need to actually know, where did marriage originate? Was it a social construct from society? Or was it from God himself, from creation itself, from the beginning? It was not. And then our theology needs to build from that as to what does that look like? And what is the purpose of marriage? I need to actually know how to answer that. And a lot of times, I haven't really thought through what's the purpose of marriage. Why get married? Well, there's really clear scriptures. Genesis 2:18-25 tells us, and it's repeated multiple times throughout Scripture. It's, first of all, we leave. And what's the second part of that? Cleave. We are one flesh. And then make the marriage your primary human relationship. There's something absolutely, critical about society starting right here. And what's so interesting is all the research that's ever been done says that and goes back to that. So why are we bucking that? We don't care about that stuff anymore. It's not a value. We value control. We value other things. So that's an interesting twist that many of you saw coming and many of you didn't see coming. How's it going to affect family? How's it going to affect your kids, whatever ages they are? We're, my 3 experiments, we're watching stuff that affect them as teenagers. Alex is 16, ready to go to college, but he's still got a year and a half. Blaze is 14 and Miley's 12. It's interesting because they are experiments. You were too, by the way. So, trying to figure out what to do. Sometimes you feel unloving when you draw a hard line. I do all the time. I feel that way. But to do that's a loving thing to do when you're trying to either protect or you're trying to repair them. Children do not need indulgent parents who continually neglect each other. They need parents who will demonstrate how to face and solve problems. Who you are matters so much more than you can imagine. I realized a few years ago, many years ago, that every session I have with a couple, and even every session I have with a person who will eventually be a couple, is I'm not sitting there in front of one person or 2 people. I'm sitting in front of generations. And it scared me to death to to realize that that kind of influence, I'm having that kind of influence, good or bad. So hopefully good, I hope so, to influence future generations. Couples that were on the verge of divorce that have stayed married, couples who have escaped disgusting abusive relationships, and each of those changes generations. So our kids need us. Our kids need a mom and dad that actually value marriage and value that piece, and actually, so take it back one step. Our kids need grandparents that are demonstrating that as well. Not grandparents that are wallflowers, grandparents that are actually able to speak into and be an example. We've always lived away from our family, which has been hard, our kids' grandparents. And it's been neat to see different surrogate grandparents we've had over the years. Others that have stepped in and had that role. Even today, knowing like our kids, 2 of our boys are at an all-nighter at our church. Good luck, guys. And to see that they're in good hands. We know who they're with, and we trust the leaders. They're not just some name on a, church employee list. They're men and women, the whole group of them that we know and we trust. It's also scary. So they need you. God's kind of marriage involves a total and irrevocable commitment of 2 sexually different people to each other. And it's interesting because I've had to change my language to say that every single time. 2 sexually different people. Because that is the only thing that is actually marriage in God's eyes. The rest is just 2 people that live together. That commitment is something that they need to see. I talk to a lot of kids and a lot of teens that they don't know whether mom and dad are going to be together tomorrow. It's constant chaos. They don't know what tomorrow holds. And it's something they feel and maybe don't verbalize, or eventually when they do verbalize, it's too late. That they're a team. A couple that's a team. So what is that? Well, husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. She's first over him. It's a servant leadership position. She watches over the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. And it's so cool to me is to think of how every one of you is so different in your gifting and talents and skills, and just how, when it comes to whether it's cooking or how you do house or your energy level or anything, and how different we are, and how much that actually is a beautiful thing if we actually let it be. And then what ways is marriage good? Marriage is permanent. There's a common vision and goals. Creating the home as a safe place. And there's loving leadership. And then this word that we actually really, really, really don't like to put up there because we misuse the word, but it's submission. And how we understand that word is actually critical. In Ephesians 5:21, I believe it is, it's one unto another. And it's actually much bigger and broader. But then there is a design for husbands. You're meant to be the leader. Servant leader, but leader. And wives, you're meant to submit to that leadership. What does that look like? What's funny, even when I talk to college students, the ones that are in a good relationship are like, I love this. The ones that are not are like, I don't like this. Like, I know, if you're married well, it's kind of a no-brainer. If you haven't, then this gets scary. Because if he crosses the line and abuses that leadership, then there's a boundary there. And she's not just some person with no say. It's a relationship. And that key word is relationship, which is beautiful. And so this becomes our foundation for marriage. What does it look like for you? Where in this list, just a little bit I've just talked about, what stood out to you as something that, okay, we need to talk more about that. We need to dig deeper in terms of what that means. And here's an example of where we take something and we run with it for years, and then there's something that comes out that's even more, I think, helpful personally. This is the Master and Johnson's 4 stages of sexual response. May this bless you. Oh, it's linear, and everything in research is all male focused. Until we finally got women doing this research and stepping in, and it stopped being just male focused, which is so great. But this is really, really simplistic and actually missing something. And then one of my friends and colleagues, Dr. Kluski, put together this, and it changed everything, I think, in terms of the way that we view getting together, coming together as a couple. But I want to take it in your thinking and in the paper that you have there, beyond just sex, way beyond that. So think about these words right here that are on this page, and I want to kind of start and kind of go in the circle here. Atmosphere. So think of your marriage. What word stands out there from that list to you? Either that's kind of, interesting word there, or does any word there stand out to you? Ones the little kids are like time, energy.
At the moment, energy, yeah. That's what I was thinking is with kids.
Yep.
And my wife homeschools them, and so time and energy.
Yep.
We feel
Amen.
your pain.
And everyone that has older kids goes, we remember that, yes. Time and energy, and actually it just dwarfs when they get older. The time and energy still should also age. But what's interesting about what the research says, which is so weird to think about, we want to live in this spontaneous world of just, we're going to come together and it's just going to be wonderful. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't tend to happen that way. Because we get busy and life happens and we have too many distractions and too many screens. And so what do? We schedule this. Which sounds ridiculous. The couples I know that actually have, that we're going to actually come together on these nights, and they have like maybe Thursday night and Sunday night or something, then you come to the night with an expectation that if it doesn't, you're okay, but you know there's another one on the corner, versus this game that gets played where it's just constant cat and mouse and it's even let down. So how you guys play through that, there's not a right way. It's learning as a couple to make this a priority, just like making conversation a priority, laughing together, touch, having hard conversations, sharing compliments with your spouse. Any of these things become a part of that. I think of that word initiation. It's hard to initiate. It's hard to open that door, to just even say, I want to have this hard conversation, to talk that way. That's a hard thing to do. Almost as hard as saying, hey, do you wanna? Kind of like that's hard. So another one is this anticipation. When there is a schedule, there can actually be anticipation. We can actually look forward to it. If you have a date night randomly, it's very different than we know that we have a date night coming up, which also means pressure to prepare for whoever's turn it is. But we're moving in that direction. On the arousal side of this one, the word playful. That's a really important word that we actually tend to get lost as an adult when we get busy. You're meant to find playfulness here. One of the things that I tell my premarital clients and other couples is every couple struggles in their sex life. And if you go see someone like me, a sex therapist, and they ask you details, run. I don't need to know your details. I know enough of what I'm doing to ask very general questions to actually get to the heart of the problem in a session or two and change your sex life. It's not as hard as we think. And 90-something% of what's going on is not something that needs medical attention. It's actually between our ears and between us. It's relationship. We need to find playfulness again. This should be something that's actually a good part in private, and you're not sharing it with your friends and giving details on Facebook or social media like some people do. We need to block those people. We need to be able to explore. This should be something that, again, that idea of once a month, spice it up, do something different, be able to explore. This should be a good thing, but we tend to shy away from that. And letting passion build. It's interesting that some of you actually know how to fight really well, almost too well. Like get heated and passionate. It's actually not a bad thing if you use that energy well. And if you have certain boundaries about lines you don't cross, and you don't do any harm, you don't say things that actually hurt the other person, it can be actually an incredible part of the us as a couple. And then we come down here to this apex one. This is the part that stands out to me, greater spiritual connection. We don't tend to think about that. I tell a lot of couples when I'm talking with them and they're struggling here, I was like, I want you to make love and I want you to pray together. And they're like, oh, can't do that. Like, God is not covering his eyes. And then I go, are you all done yet? He made them both, and he actually wants them together. What they've actually found with couples in their dating life, if they're not careful about praying together and the boundaries, lots of babies have come in the world because we were praying together. We were praying together, and our hands got a little too handsy, and we went a little too far. Prayer is bonding. Prayer is beautiful. Prayer is meant to be a part of even this part of us as a couple. Even this word abandonment. Oh, this sounds really weird because we've been taught, if you grew up in the church, to be in control almost. And this whole area of our life is something that feels out of control. How do you abandon? How do you actually surrender? I think this is where it actually helps us find something else that we actually maybe haven't found in ourselves. That part of marriage is meant to be two people that come together and there's a connection there that actually is very spiritual and very beautiful. And the two people relate to it different. Absolutely, yes. And how do I embrace the difference versus fight the difference? Which is really important. And then you have the afterglow. There's affirmation and reflection and basking. How can we actually just be? Just be with each other. Some of you know how to do this well. You know how to sit in a room in silence and just be. Some of you don't have any clue how to do that. I mean, a lot, especially because of TVs and because of phones. We don't know. I missed the day when we would actually sit in like the waiting room of the dentist office and actually talk to someone in the room, which is now illegal and against like every law on the books kind of thing. Like everyone's on their own phone and it's something you can't do. It's how many times as a couple do we do that? Do we actually miss each other because we don't? And so one of your assignments, your homework assignment, is going to be this brakes and accelerators. And we're going to look at this in different ways coming up. So what does this mean? And what I want you to do, and this will be after, because I talk too much, this will be after you do your desserts. You'll come back and do this hopefully tonight. But think about the things that actually get in the way of the us as a couple, and I mean that on every level. Having those, me sharing how I feel about you and encouraging you. Me actually sharing hard things. Our sex life. Our adventures, our being active together, our laughter. All those pieces that I started with. What are the things that get in the way, breaks, and what are those things that actually put things in order? Like here's a list to kind of think about and to start from, if you will. That when there's love there and romance and closeness, and when there's imagination and attractiveness and erotic stimuli and the husband's desire of his wife's body is a good thing, when that's there, it makes it easier. But when there's fatigue and depression and stress, when there's previous trauma, medications, criticism, get away. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear you. And there's this divide. And what does Satan want to do? He wants all of this. He wants your medications to get in the way of your us. He wants the TV. He wants your phone. He wants the kids. He wants... So we have to intentionally plan against that. It doesn't naturally happen. What actually is naturally happening for a lot of couples is they're arriving at empty nest and look at each other and go, who are you? I don't know you anymore. That's not okay. We lost each other along the way. So how to lean into and embrace us. I'm going to show you this kind of wrap up today. It's in the, I think it's on the next page, Because I Love You thing. A little later on, maybe it's in the back. You can put that one out. I'll move this one here. This is something that my one of my mentors put together and uses with his clients. And I love the idea of it and the tool of it. So it's the Because I Love You card. So he says in here, so kitchen cupboards are large and necessary. Dirty dishes go into the dishwasher. Run the dishwasher and you have a quick place to find all the dishes you typically use. Need to clean up? No need to hunt through the cupboard. It's in the dishwasher. The dirty cup then sits in the sink until the dishwasher is empty and ready to run the next load. Run the dishwasher and you set to go again. In contrast, my wife believes the sink should not have a bottom. Nothing stays in the sink. Further, any dishes left in the dishwasher after cleaning up. So, what is it saying? We're different. And what he found with his clients, this Dr. Seitzman has been a sex therapist for 30-some years. He's a former Wesleyan pastor, and I love this man and what he's done with couples. He made a card, this Because I Love You card. Just a little like business card side, and the goal is to pass it back and forth between you. So I go do the dishes, not because I want to do the dishes. I do the dishes because I love you. Like what I have found around our house is when Kelly's gone, I will, and I'm not nice to the kid there, I'm a slave driver, like, come on, clean the house, clean the house. But when my wife gets home, she doesn't notice that I did anything. And here's how the brain works. She sees it, but it doesn't really register that he did this because he loves her. It was intentional. So here's what I do. I take her around from one thing to the other and go, I did this, and then I did this, and I did this. And I want her to pet me and go, good boy, good boy. That's the honest truth. Because what is my top love language?
Touch.
Affirmation.
Those two. Touch and words of affirmation. What are her two bottom ones? Yeah, don't go there. Hers are acts of service. And what does it look like to love her? Be with the kids. Do stuff with them. So we're different. How do we celebrate the differences and then lean into something as cheesy as that might be, but where it's an actual competition of I'm going to do this because I love you. And now it's their turn to take that card and go, I'm going to do something and try to, whether it's a little note inside their lunchbox that they take the next day and now they have the card. How can we intentionally attune to each other? And that will transform your relationship. The younger you learn it, the better. And it's never too late to learn because we get complacent if we're not careful. And so this becomes a really neat, I believe, tool to pursue my spouse, to pursue them. For me, one of the verses that's absolutely just been my verse for a couple of decades has been, now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly of all we ask or think, according to the power that works in us. He can do anything. One thing I love about being a counselor is to see God can do anything. And I've seen couples where I would have bet money on we're not going to make it in my heart, and I've watched them fight through and grow and strengthen. And not over years, and sometimes a matter of weeks. Because who's the actual changer of us, transformer in us? God, the Holy Spirit. You want to change your spouse? Pray. The Holy Spirit changes them. You try to, you're now the nag and
Bad guy.
Proverbs. You're the bad guy every time. So leaning into, attuning to your spouse opens us up to actually deeper conversation, deeper commitment, deeper care, them noticing things about us and taking the steps to meet those needs because they love you, versus feeling like you're always just kind of getting the leftovers, and it's just hard when you have little kids. That makes it even more intentional how critical it is when there's less and less time. Or if you're in a busy season at work, it's even more important. If you have opposite schedules, it's even more important. How to attune to each other. So tonight, what's your homework?
It's accelerated.
Brakes and accelerators. And I want you to start there, and what it says on the top, it says atmosphere. It's thinking about just the environment that you live in with your spouse. That atmosphere, I like that word. What is it? Can you clean house tonight and think through some things you could do that's different? That's going to actually improve how you engage with each other and how you love each other. And then we will continue tomorrow.